The Chaser Report is recorded on Gadigal land.
Striving for mediocrity in a world of excellence. This is the Chaser Report.
Hello and welcome to the Chaser Report. Dom Knight, joined today by Andrew Hansen once again. Hello, Andrew.
Hey there, Dommy.
Thank you for podcasting with us. Charles being in America, it's always nice to hear your voice down the podcast line from Melbourne.
Well, I'm doing it in Melbourne. Where are you today, Dommy?
I'm in Sydney today.
You're in Sydney. Sydney.
The Chase is not known for its diversity, historically speaking. It's a problem.
Yeah, but we're proving you wrong on that.
It's clearly a problem. But having a Melburnian
all over the place
is a big difference. You live in the comedy capital of Australia now, where all the live music and the two things you do, live music and comedy, all headquartered in Melbourne. Why did the rest of us never move there?
Well, it was a big mistake, yes. It was a big surprise to me when I moved here to discover that it has this thing called live entertainment, which I'd never seen when I lived in Sydney. But it's a sort of weird kind of industry, I guess you'd say. And people stand up on the things called stages, and they play instruments, and they amuse a room full of people. It's quite good, and I think it's something that might catch on. I'm hoping around the rest of Australia, but
it's an interesting idea.
We'll see.
We did open that venue in Sydney at one point, Giant Dwarf in Redfern, which was owned by many of the original members of the Chaser. But I don't think any live comedy ever happened there because it was in Sydney. I think it was just used for kind of corporate conferences, wasn't it?
That's right. Yeah. Just a lot of wheeling and dealing, boasting about investments and shares. Yeah.
I presume people went there and had cocaine or something, but nothing entertaining ever took place at that venue. And of course,
it was the wrong city.
It closed during COVID. Whereas there's a venue in Melbourne I haven't been to yet called Comedy Republic, which was started by a couple of great comedians. I think Reece Nicholson's and Kynan Wheatley were involved in that. That's still open, isn't it?
Yes.
They actually opened a comedy venue.
Yes. It's Comedy Republic is one of the best comedy venues in Melbourne. Yeah.
Hang on a sec. One of the best? There's more than one comedy venue in Melbourne?
Look, you wouldn't believe how many there actually are. I mean, I know you're sort of kidding, but when I moved here, I actually didn't realise just how many comedy venues there are in Melbourne. It's quite astonishing how many there are. It's almost every second pub has live comedy. It's a genuine thing in Melbourne.
They have an unusual comedy festival.
I've been doing a bit of it myself, actually.
Have you?
I've been doing some more. Well, because I live here now, I thought, I should probably just start doing the actual gigs. So yeah, I have been doing some live spots. And,
lovely.
It's been huge fun. I caught Tony Martin. I was doing the same night as him a few weeks back.
Really?
At the McKinnon Hotel, which is a very good comedy night. And,
are you serious? There's the pubs there that actually just regularly have comedians at them.
I'm afraid so, Dommy. Yes,
oh my god,
it's a thing. Yeah, this should be better known. I feel tourists could even come to Melbourne and experience this weird thing that gets done here. And nowhere else.
Well, there's the Melbourne International Comedy Festival, which is I don't understand it, Andrew. I mean, I don't understand how it works because at the Sydney Comedy Festival, everyone plays one or perhaps two shows, and that's it. You got to kind of get there, and it'll be half full in most cases.
Yeah,
and it'll go off, and it won't make any money. Whereas in Melbourne, everyone performs for 3.5 weeks, which means that there's actually time to build an audience. And if there's a good show, like Hannah Gadsby's Nanette, you can go and it'll get a bit of buzz and suddenly win awards and people will go and see it and it'll become globally popular. Whereas if she had done that show in Sydney, she would have done it once. No one would have come to see it and she would have gone ahead with retiring from comedy, presumably.
That's kind of how it works. That is how it works. I mean, for most comedians, of course, you do the Melbourne Comedy Festival and maybe do 2 weeks worth of shows or 4 weeks worth of shows, and at the end you realise you've lost a huge amount of money, and then the next year you do it again for reasons that you can't comprehend. But some people do turn a profit, Donny, as you say.
Extraordinary.
And of course Sam Campbell, he's doing brilliant. I mean, he just won the huge prize at Edinburgh, which is another city that has comedy. I don't know if you've heard of that, Donny. But
I've heard of Edinburgh, but because that's not the train spotting city. Where that's Glasgow, isn't it? Edinburgh's not the place with all the heroin.
It's one of those Scottish cities.
Yeah, because I mean they're best known for heroin, Scottish cities, but I understand there is comedy as well.
And deep fried heroin.
Yes, it's lovely how they do that. Right, so you live in a city that it almost seems as though we chose the wrong place in which to start the Chaser. It might be more of a going concern. We might not have to resort to podcasting. had we
I feel
based it in the city
you're
with
right.
a comedy scene.
Oh, don't worry. Melbourne comics also do podcasts as well, Dommy.
thank God.
Every single one of us has a podcast.
Yeah, why have the rest of us not followed you down there? Chris Taylor lived in Melbourne before we even met him. What's he thinking?
Yeah. Well, look, it's up to you. You know, if you want to live in a city where the actual thing that you're trying to do happens, then it's worth living here. You know.
And it's the properties are still cheaper. They're expensive, aren't they now? But still cheaper than Sydney.
They are. You look, they're only insanely overpriced instead of astronomically insanely overpriced. Yeah,
Pretty exciting
It's expensive to live in
package.
Melbourne because of the climate. You have to heat your house for 11 months of the year. So 11, from February through to December, your house needs to be heated at great cost. So that's kind of, I think, why maybe the houses are a bit cheaper, because you have to spend at least $200,000 a year on ducted heating.
I'm just fascinated that you can go to just a regular pub and see Andrew Hansen and Tony Martin, and all of our favourite comics from a bygone era performing in Melbourne. People who used to have TV shows on the ABC.
That's also,
Although you do still, I know you're still doing things. I know, but.
Well, not really. Just Tony and me performing at the pub. You know, that's what you spend your twilight years.
I was
doing.
going to boast here, if you don't mind me boasting. Once
Boast,
upon a
Tommy,
time,
boast.
I was lucky enough to be invited to MC Tony Martin's book launch. He had a lovely
good
novel.
yeah, that'd be a nice gig. That'd be a nice gig.
great
So
novel.
now, which book?
It was his novel.
His
He's
novel.
only done the one novel.
Deadly Kerfuffle, is it what it's called?
Very Tony Martin name. And we had it at a place called Better Read Than Dead, so fitting venue in Newtown. And, one of Australia's most beloved comedians, like an absolute master of the art form. Probably 20 people turned up, maybe 25 would have turned up to
Sydney,
the event.
Yeah. It's a very Sydney
it was
turnout.
Definitely not worth his time flying up for it. I really hope he had a gig or some sort of event on. It wouldn't have been a comedy gig. I mean, some sort of paid reason to be in Sydney. And that was it. And then we had a lovely time. No one saw us do it. I presume he sold 5 books or something. And that was the end. But he and I went and had a chat, and we actually had a lovely evening just having a chat about comedy, largely Melbourne-based comedy, because it's where comedy happens. And, oh, God, I've fucked my life up, haven't I? I've lived in the wrong city for 45 years.
You really have, Tommy. You really have.
But it's not just me. The rest of the Chaser all live in Sydney. We're fucking idiots.
I know. It's an
Chaz
accident of birth. I
Chaz is
suppose.
even obsessed with AFL,
He loves it.
and he's in the wrong city.
I've had to, yes. Jazzy's favourite team are the Bulldogs, and they're my local team. I live very near the Wooden Oval, actually.
Yeah.
Here in
So
Melbourne.
you'd be going to all the games, presumably.
Well, look, I'd only heard of AFL last week, even though I've lived in Melbourne for 4.5 years. But it was news to me. But yeah, that's another form of live entertainment that is done in Melbourne. I learned they kick this ball around on fields when they're not doing comedy.
I think it might be time to move. I can't honestly think of a reason why we haven't based ourselves there. It seems
come on down.
This is a major life decision. I probably have to talk to my wife about it, but
No, just book it.
just book a mover. Just head on down.
now.
Check it out.
Look, I'll do one for you. I'm booking one online as we speak. Here we go. Got a removalist company here. What's your address, Tommy? I'll just type it in.
Right next to Charles, just down the road from Charles. And hang on a sec. Just that there are some drawbacks though. You're quite fashionable in your wardrobe.
Afraid so.
Yeah,
Afraid so.
so you sort of fit in. I'll be laughed out of Melbourne, won't I?
You'll have to
They
do
wouldn't
something
accept me
about
down there.
No, they probably wouldn't actually, but But look, there's no sunshine or opportunities to get healthy here, though, Dommy. So, if you look particularly sort of weathered and exhausted,
That's
then
good.
you probably would fit in. You'd fit in quite nicely. I've
you
noticed
think
that I've never seen anybody healthy walking around in Melbourne. Nobody has a tan.
That's a plus.
Everyone's frozen and to the bone all the time, huddling in these puffy jackets. A very sickly lot we are.
I mean, I don't go to the lovely beaches in Sydney much anyway, so it makes total sense.
Exactly. So I feel you might actually fit in.
Here's a bit of an awkward one, but just be honest with me, okay? Just be honest. Tell me the truth here. Am I the right level of pretentious for Melbourne?
Oh,
because
beyond, Dommy. If
I mean, I
anything,
do
you'd be
like
too
opera.
pretentious.
I like opera. I'm
Yeah.
a wanker, but I'm a Sydney wanker. Can I adapt? What do I have to do to adapt to Melbourne? You know, I like talking about visual art.
Yeah.
I'm boring about stuff like that. You know,
Yep.
I just don't know. But if I feel intimidated in Melbourne by all the well-dressed, pretentious people
Well, that's true.
wearing black skivvies.
Yeah, they are better dressed than you, Dommy, but I reckon you and I could certainly hold our own for pretentiousness. That's not going to be an issue for you here.
Do I have to completely hate Sydney? I mean, I know it's standard. Is it required?
Yeah.
Or will I be
yeah.
pitied for having spent most of my life in Sydney before seeing the light?
No, you just don't mention it. You don't mention it because it's just true. Melbourne people are quite racist about Sydney. We
Do you not mention
we all
it?
think it's the
Do you just simply
the worst.
it just doesn't come up?
Oh yes. Oh yeah, I never mentioned that I'm from there because this is honest to God true. When I first came to Melbourne and I mentioned that I was from Sydney to this young woman, and she said, "Oh God, Sydney people are so rude."
Do you, so
a party.
your wife is a Victorian. Do you
Yes.
simply kind of glom onto her life history and talk about the delights of regional Victorian towns as though you'd lived in them your whole life?
And all the wonderful suburbs of Melbourne. I've sort of learned what they all are. So yes, you just learn not to even mention the bad place. Or that you have any connection to it.
Do you have to shit on Frankston? Because I know that's the 101 comedy thing there, is you have to make fun of people
Kind
from
of
Frankston.
suppose, yeah. It's the butt of jokes. You've got to be a little careful because a lot of people do live in Frankston.
Yeah.
So you can't. You've got to make sure that nobody actually lives in Frankston. I mean, back when I used to live in Sydney many years ago, I made this mistake, Tommy. It was a terrible day. Oh God, it was an awful time. This was a terrible moment. I'd been house hunting and sort of looking, and we were looking kind of on the Central Coast, and there was one area in the Central Coast which is called Narara, and I thought I don't know if you've been to Narara.
Never.
But I really didn't want to live there. And so I said I was on a shoot actually, this TV shoot, in Sydney, and I just said, yeah, I'm thinking of moving to the Central Coast of New South Wales. And I really like some of the places, but I went and looked at Narara, and I really didn't like Narara. I did not get a good feeling from Narara at all. It gave me a very bad vibe.
Right.
And I just thought I'd get really depressed if I lived there. And and one of the crew just slowly raised his hand and said, "I live in Narara."
Right.
I mean, what are the chances? It's not. I was in Sydney, doing a shoot. It wasn't even in the same part of Australia. And this guy in the crew travels like 2 hours every day to get to Sydney to do these shoots. I mean, I thought I was safe, but so never diss a place.
So never
it doesn't
shit
matter
on a
how
place.
far away. No, it doesn't matter. Even if it's a 2 hour drive
But every
away.
time I've been to the Melbourne Comedy Festival, and I've been many, many times, people always shit on Frankston. It's Dave Hughes' entire life. Basically, he gets up in the morning and shits on Frankston, doesn't he? Isn't that just basically Hughes' life?
Well, they traditionally have. I mean, it's seen as a bit hack and 101 these days. So the onus is on you.
This is 15, 20 years ago that it was fashionable back then, I guess.
No, that's right, and I think a lot of people still do have that notion of Frankston. But I mean, I've tried in my live shows recently to think of new Frankstons.
Oh wow!
I've tried to work out what other places you could use, as the place to diss. And,
surely you can still pick
it's
on
great fun. You
Adelaide.
experiment. I mean,
does Adelaide still work as a punchline?
I don't feel it does.
Because you can't use Hobart anymore. You can't make fun of... No. Because everyone wants to go there for the art museum.
Everyone loves it, and everyone loves Adelaide too. It's a beautiful place, and it's a wonderful place to visit. It's got the fabulous food and wine, and the Adelaide Fringe is terrific. And I don't think that works.
So we've got to think of original content that isn't just shitting on the place down the road. Oh God,
that's the challenge. That's the challenge. No, exactly. I love visiting Adelaide. That's the other. Actually, Adelaide's the other place that does have some live entertainment. Nobody knows because nobody lives in Adelaide. There's only about 20 people living there. But no, it has fabulous live.
I must say, I once went to the festival, just once.
The festival's brilliant.
To
the festival's
the Writers'
fantastic.
Week. I went to the festival there, and I was out until 4 a.m.
Yeah.
And it turned out that I knew all these people who were there, and I had one of the best nights I've had in many, many years. So clearly, I mean, Sydney is dead all year round. Adelaide has, a couple of good weeks. So Adelaide wins. This is terrible.
I think Adelaide does win. I mean, look, maybe the butt of jokes now needs to be Sydney. You know,
Well, I mean,
it's kind of perhaps
it
it's
does.
lost whatever the charms that it used to have.
I mean, perhaps
And it can be
never
the new
had any.
Frankston. Is Sydney the
Sydney
Frankston?
is the Frankston.
of
It's the new
20
Frankston. People in Frankston
2022.
pity us now. Presumably, particularly during all the kind of lockout laws, because Melbourne had lockout laws. I was in Melbourne during the lockout laws. They had them for a month or something, realised that they were fucking stupid and cancelled them.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
That's
It's
right.
a terrible realisation where you wonder, this happened to me a lot in school, you wonder who the weakest link was, who the run to the litter was, and suddenly you realise it's you. And I'm worried that this is Sydney now. We're paying lots of money to live somewhere fundamentally stupid.
I fear this may be the case, Tommy. Yeah.
This is
Move.
very sad. This is very sad.
Move out, and let's do that.
Can you afford to live in Melbourne, Andrew?
No.
As a podcaster?
Oh, especially not as a podcaster. No.
Oh well.
No. No, it's
fit right in.
extremely unaffordable. Not as bad as Sydney, but impossible to live. Nobody can afford to live in Melbourne anymore. No.
I probably couldn't afford to move in.
No, you couldn't. No.
Thank you, Andrew. That's been
like everywhere.
really fascinating and genuinely revealing. Our gear is from Road. We're part of the Acast Creator Network. And we'll catch you next time, possibly from Melbourne.